The crystal chandelier cast fractured light across the marble floor of Le Jardin, and I watched each shard dance like secrets, waiting to be discovered. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the white linen napkin for the third time, my pulse quickening with each approaching footstep in the dining room beyond. 3 months I'd worked here, 3 months of serving the wealthy and powerful of the city, but tonight felt different. Tonight, the very air seemed to hum with anticipation and danger. "Table 12 needs their wine," Marcus called from behind the bar, his voice cutting through my racing thoughts. I nodded, smoothing my black dress and checking my reflection in the polished surface of the wine cooler. My blonde hair was pulled back in a neat chignon, professional and unremarkable, exactly how I preferred it. Invisible. Safe. But as I lifted the bottle of Chateau Margaux, worth more than my monthly rent, my eyes found him. He sat alone at the corner table, the one we reserved for our most exclusive guests, the one that offered perfect views of both entrances and the kitchen. Everything about him commanded attention, even as he seemed to retreat into shadows. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that missed nothing. His suit was impeccable, charcoal gray that probably cost more than my car, but it was the way he held himself that made my breath catch. Power. Control. Danger wrapped in silk and wool. 3 other men sat with their backs to me at a nearby table, speaking in rapid, heated whispers. I caught fragments as I approached table 12. Something about shipments, about territories, about respect. But their words felt distant, muffled by the strange, magnetic pull of the man in the corner. "Your wine, Mr. Beaumont," I murmured to the older gentleman at table 12, my voice steady despite the chaos in my chest. He barely glanced up from his conversation about art acquisitions and tax shelters. I poured with practiced precision, but my awareness remained fixed on the corner table, on the man who sat like a king in exile. As I turned to leave, one of the men at the nearby table raised his voice. "He doesn't understand a word we're saying. Thinks he's so superior, but he can't even follow a simple conversation." The words were cruel, dismissive, and something twisted in my stomach. I'd heard enough languages in my years working restaurants across Europe to recognize when someone was being mocked for their accent, their efforts to communicate. But this felt worse somehow, more calculated. Should we tell him the shipment won't be coming, or let him figure it out when his warehouse stays empty? Another voice, equally sharp with amusement, I moved closer, refilling water glasses with unnecessary attention to detail, and that's when I heard it. The man in the corner, their target, spoke softly into his phone, and the words that emerged made my world tilt on its axis. Korean. He was speaking Korean, his voice low and melodious, every syllable precise and beautiful. But beneath the beauty, I heard something else. Loneliness. Isolation, the particular weariness that comes from being perpetually misunderstood. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory, telling me stories of her time in Seoul, teaching me phrases and songs in quiet moments when my parents thought I was sleeping. "Language is a bridge, little star," she used to say. "Sometimes we build it, sometimes we cross it, but we must always respect it." The men at the nearby table continued their cruel commentary, assuming their target couldn't understand their mocking English. They spoke of changing contract terms, of teaching lessons about respect, of making him wait and wonder. My fingers tightened around the water pitcher until my knuckles went white. Before I could second-guess myself, before fear could paralyze me, I approached his table. His dark eyes lifted to mine, and I felt the impact, like electricity. Up close, he was even more devastating. Beautiful in a way that made my chest tight, but with shadows beneath his eyes that spoke of burdens too heavy for one person to carry. "Excuse me," I said softly, then switched to Korean, the words flowing more easily than they had any right to after years of disuse. "The men at table 7 are discussing your business arrangements. They believe you cannot understand them, and they are taking advantage of this assumption. The transformation was immediate and breathtaking. His eyes widened, genuine surprise replacing the careful mask he'd worn all evening. For a moment, he looked younger, almost vulnerable, as if I'd reached through layers of protection to touch something real and raw beneath. "You speak Korean," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, as if he were afraid the words might shatter this impossible moment. "My grandmother taught me," I replied in his language, setting down fresh silverware I didn't need to replace. She lived in Seoul for many years. She always said that understanding someone's words is the first step to understanding their heart. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in that carefully constructed armor. He leaned forward slightly, and I caught the scent of his cologne. Expensive, but underneath it something warm and distinctly him. What did they say exactly? His Korean was more relaxed now, tinged with relief and something that might have been gratitude. I glanced toward table 7, where the men continued their conversation, oblivious to the fact that their intended victim now had an ally. "They plan to delay your shipment. They think you'll wait indefinitely because you won't know to ask questions. They're testing you." His jaw tightened, but not with anger, with calculation. "And you're telling me this because?" The question hung between us, loaded with implications I wasn't ready to examine. Why was I helping him? Why was I risking my job, my safety, for a man I didn't know? "Because everyone deserves to be understood," I said simply, "and because cruelty should never go unchallenged, no matter how quietly it's delivered." He studied my face as if memorizing every detail, and I felt exposed, seen in a way that was both terrifying and exhilarating. "What's your name?" "Claire," I whispered, the sound barely audible over the gentle clink of crystal and silver around us. "Claire?" He repeated it, like a prayer, like something precious. "I'm Jinwoo." The name fit him perfectly, strong and elegant, like the man himself. "It's nice to meet you, Jinwoo." "The pleasure," he said, switching back to English with only the faintest accent, "is entirely mine." The realization hit me like cold water. He understood English perfectly. Every cruel word, every mocking tone, every assumption about his intelligence or capability. He'd sat there, enduring their disrespect, for reasons I couldn't begin to fathom. "You knew," I breathed. "You understood them all along." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, the first genuine expression I'd seen from him all evening. Sometimes it's advantageous to let people underestimate you, but sometimes... His eyes met mine again, and the intensity there made my pulse skip. Sometimes someone comes along who makes you remember what it feels like to be truly seen. Before I could respond, Marcus's voice cut through the moment. "Claire, table 15 needs their dessert menu." I straightened, the spell broken but not destroyed. "I should go." "Wait." Jinwoo's hand moved slightly across the table, not quite touching mine, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of his skin. "Will you be working tomorrow night?" My heart hammered against my ribs. "Yes." "Then this conversation isn't over." I nodded, not trusting my voice, and turned away on unsteady legs. But I felt his eyes on me as I moved through the restaurant, felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. Whatever had just happened between us, whatever line I'd just crossed, there was no going back. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of mechanical motions and racing thoughts. I served wine and cleared plates and smiled at appropriate moments, but my mind remained fixed on the corner table, on the man who spoke in poetry and shadows, on the moment when understanding had sparked between us like lightning. When I finally glanced back toward his table near closing time, it was empty. Only a folded napkin remained, and tucked beneath it, a business card with elegant script and a phone number. On the back, written in careful English, "Thank you for seeing me. Thaymore, Bringley, J." My hands shook as I slipped the card into my apron pocket, the weight of it both terrifying and thrilling. Whatever game I'd just entered, whatever dangerous world I'd glimpsed tonight, I knew with crystal clarity that my quiet, invisible life was about to change forever. The next evening arrived with unusual swiftness, as if time itself were eager to resume our interrupted conversation. I'd spent the day in a strange, suspended state, going through the motions of my normal routine, while my thoughts spiraled around that business card, around the memory of Jinwoo's eyes when I'd spoken to him in his own language. I arrived at Le Jardin 30 minutes early, needing time to steady my nerves and question my sanity. Was I really doing this? Was I really allowing myself to be drawn into the orbit of a man who was clearly dangerous, clearly involved in things I couldn't begin to understand? But as I tied my apron and checked my appearance in the staff mirror, I remembered the loneliness I'd heard in his voice, the careful isolation he maintained even in a crowded restaurant. Maybe danger wasn't the only thing that defined him. Maybe, beneath all that controlled power, was simply a man who'd been misunderstood for too long. "You're glowing," said Amélie, the other evening waitress, as she applied lipstick at the mirror beside me. "Did you meet someone?" "Something like that," I murmured, unable to deny the flutter of anticipation in my chest. The dinner service began normally enough. The usual parade of wealthy patrons, political figures, and business moguls filled the elegant dining room. I moved through my section with practiced efficiency, but my eyes kept drifting to the corner table. Empty. Still empty at 7. Still empty at 8. Maybe he'd changed his mind. Maybe whatever moment we'd shared yesterday had been nothing more than politeness, gratitude for a small kindness. Maybe I'd imagined the electricity, the sense of recognition that had passed between us. At 8:30, I was refilling bread baskets when Marcus approached with his clipboard and worried expression. "Claire, Table 12 is asking for you specifically. They said you helped them last night with translation services?" My pulse jumped. Table 12 faced the corner, had a clear view of the entire restaurant. If someone was asking for translation services and requesting me specifically, I smoothed my dress and walked across the dining room, my heartbeat loud in my ears. 3 men sat at table 12, all wearing expensive suits and expressions of barely contained impatience. But it was the man in the center who made my breath catch. Not Jinwoo, but someone whose cold eyes and predatory smile made every instinct scream danger. "You're Claire," the man said without preamble. It wasn't a question. "We need your linguistic skills." I forced my voice to remain steady. "How can I help you this evening? Our business associate will be joining us shortly. Korean gentleman. We understand you can communicate with him in his native language." The man's smile never reached his eyes. "We need you to translate something for us, word for word. Exactly as we tell you." Everything in me recoiled from his tone, from the implicit threat beneath his polite words. "I'm not a professional translator. I only speak conversational Korean." "That will be sufficient." He gestured to the empty chair at their table. "Sit. Wait with us." It wasn't a request. I glanced around the dining room, but Marcus was busy with other tables, and none of the other staff were paying attention. These men had clearly done their research, had learned about my interaction with Jinwoo the previous night. The question was, how? I remained standing. "I'm sorry, but I'm working this evening. I can't sit with guests." The man's expression darkened slightly. "Perhaps you misunderstand this situation. Our associate has been difficult to work with, stubborn. We need to make certain he receives our message clearly. You're going to help us ensure there are no misunderstandings." Before I could respond, I felt a presence behind me, a warmth that made my skin tingle with recognition. Jinwoo's voice, low and controlled, cut through the tension. "Gentlemen, I see you've met Claire." I turned, and the sight of him made my knees weak. Tonight he wore a midnight blue suit that made his dark eyes even more intense. And when those eyes met mine, I saw both relief and concern flickering in their depths. "Ah, perfect timing." The man at the table said, his predatory smile widening. "Please, join us, both of you." Jinwoo moved to stand beside me, close enough that I could feel the controlled tension radiating from his body. Claire is working this evening. Perhaps we should discuss our business privately. But Claire is part of our business now, isn't she? The man's tone was silk over steel. She was so helpful yesterday, making sure you understood everything. We thought she might be equally helpful today. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. These men had been watching, had seen our interaction, had decided to use me as a weapon against Jinwoo. Whatever game they were playing, I'd unknowingly made myself a piece on their board. Jinwoo's hand brushed against mine, the briefest contact, but I felt the message in it. Stay calm, trust me, let me handle this. What exactly do you need translated? I asked, hating how my voice trembled slightly. The lead man reached into his jacket and withdrew a folded document. Simple business terms, contract modifications. We want to ensure our Korean friend here understands exactly what we're offering. I took the document with reluctant fingers, and even without reading it, I could feel the malice radiating from the paper. These weren't business terms. This was a trap, an ultimatum, a threat wrapped in legal language. Perhaps, Jinwoo said quietly, we should move this conversation somewhere more private? The other guests? No, the man said sharply. Here is perfect. Public. Witnessed. Claire will translate. You'll respond. And we'll all understand each other perfectly. I unfolded the document with shaking hands, my eyes scanning the English text. What I read made my stomach drop. It wasn't a contract. It was an eviction notice for multiple properties, a seizure order for business assets, a systematic dismantling of everything Jinwoo had built. The terms were brutal, the timeline impossible, and the consequences for refusal were spelled out in language that was both legal and terrifying. Read it, the man commanded, in Korean, word for word. I looked up at Jinwoo, saw the carefully neutral expression he wore, the mask he'd perfected to hide his true thoughts. But I also saw something else, a tiny shake of his head, so subtle anyone else would have missed it. He didn't want me to translate this. Not because he couldn't understand it, but because he didn't want me involved in whatever war these men were waging against him. I began, then stopped. My mind raced, searching for options, for ways to extricate myself from this situation without making things worse for Jinwoo. Having trouble with the vocabulary? The man asked, his tone mocking. Perhaps our Korean friend can help you. He seems to have quite a few opinions about business terms. That's when Jinwoo did something unexpected. He smiled. It wasn't the controlled, polite expression he'd worn yesterday. This was something altogether more dangerous. The smile of a man who'd been underestimated once too often and was done playing defensive. Actually, he said, his English crisp and unaccented, I think Claire has done enough translating for one evening. The change in the room's atmosphere was immediate and electric. The three men at the table went very still, suddenly realizing that their carefully constructed game had just shifted beyond their control. You speak English, the lead man said slowly. Fluently. Jinwoo's smile widened, and I caught a glimpse of something predatory beneath his elegant exterior. I also read it quite well. Legal documents, for instance, eviction notices, asset seizure orders. Remarkably creative fiction. Really? The man's face flushed red. You've been playing us. No, Jinwoo replied, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. You've been playing yourselves. Did you really think I built my business empire by being naive? By failing to understand the nature of my enemies? I stood frozen between them, clutching the document, finally understanding that I'd witnessed more than a language barrier last night. I'd witnessed strategy. Jinwoo had let these men believe he was isolated, vulnerable, easier to manipulate. He'd used their prejudices against them, let them reveal their intentions while they thought he couldn't understand. The young lady, Jinwoo continued, his eyes never leaving the three men, was simply being kind to someone she thought was struggling to communicate. She has nothing to do with our business disagreements. She's involved now, the lead man snarled, rising from his chair. She's seen our terms. Terms? Jinwoo laughed, and the sound sent chills down my spine. Is that what you call extortion these days? How civilized. The tension in the air was suffocating. Other diners were beginning to notice the disturbance. Conversations stopping as heads turned toward our table. Marcus was approaching with concerned eyes, clearly sensing trouble but not understanding the nature of it. Claire, Jinwoo said softly, not taking his eyes off the three men. Perhaps you should check on your other tables. I should have left. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to walk away, to let these dangerous men settle their dangerous business without an innocent waitress caught in the crossfire. But something in Jinwoo's voice, something vulnerable beneath the controlled menace, made me stay. No, I said quietly, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. I think I'll stay. Jinwoo's eyes flicked to mine, and I saw surprise there, followed quickly by something that might have been admiration. Brave girl, the lead man said, his tone turning ugly. But stupid. You have no idea what kind of man you're protecting. I know enough, I replied, lifting my chin despite the fear coursing through my veins. I know he treats service staff with respect. I know he doesn't mock people for their language barriers. I know he doesn't threaten innocent bystanders to make his points. The man took a step toward me, and everything happened at once. Jinwoo moved faster than I thought possible, positioning himself between the man and me with fluid grace. Marcus arrived with 2 security guards, clearly having called for backup when he noticed the tension. And from somewhere behind me, another voice spoke up. Is there a problem here? I turned to see a woman approaching, tall, elegant, with silver hair and the kind of bearing that suggested both wealth and authority. Behind her walked 2 men in expensive suits who carried themselves like bodyguards. Mrs. Whitmore? The lead man said, his aggression immediately shifting to obsequious politeness. No problem at all, just a business discussion. Mrs. Whitmore's eyes swept over the scene. The document in my hands, Jinwoo's protective stance, the 3 men's barely concealed hostility. Her expression remained pleasant, but something sharp flickered in her gaze. How interesting, she said mildly. Mr. Park, isn't it? I don't believe we've been properly introduced. Jinwoo inclined his head respectfully. Mrs. Whitmore, an honor. The honor is mine. I've heard excellent things about your shipping operations. Very efficient, very reliable. She turned to the 3 men with a smile that could have cut glass. Gentlemen, I hope you're not causing trouble for one of my favorite new business partners. The implication was clear. Mrs. Whitmore, whoever she was, held enough power in this city to make these men think twice about their tactics. The lead man's face cycled through several expressions before settling on forced calm. Of course not. Just clarifying some contract terms. How thoughtful. Mrs. Whitmore's tone suggested it was anything but. Perhaps you could clarify them somewhere other than Le Jardin's dining room? I believe other guests are trying to enjoy their meals. It was a dismissal, politely delivered, but absolute in its authority. The 3 men recognized it as such, gathering their things with barely concealed fury. This isn't over, the lead man murmured as he passed Jinwoo. No, Jinwoo agreed quietly. It isn't. They left. And the dining room gradually returned to its normal hum of conversation. Mrs. Whitmore turned to Jinwoo and me with genuine warmth. I do hope they weren't too unpleasant. Some people have no appreciation for proper dining etiquette. Thank you, Jinwoo said simply. Your intervention was timely. Think nothing of it. Competition is healthy, but intimidation is simply bad manners. She glanced at me with curious eyes. And you, dear, showed remarkable composure. Not many people would stand their ground in such circumstances. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I couldn't let them. Bully someone you cared about? Mrs. Whitmore's smile was knowing. Quite right. Jinwoo, you should keep this one close. Loyalty like that is rarer than diamonds. With that cryptic comment, she glided away to her own table. leaving Jinwoo and me alone in the aftermath of the confrontation. My hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading, and I realized I was still clutching the document that had started everything. "Here," I said, offering it to Jinwoo. "I think this belongs to you." He took it, his fingers brushing mine in the transfer. "Thank you for not translating it, for staying, for—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "For seeing me." The simple phrase carried so much weight, so much meaning, that I felt my eyes fill with unexpected tears. "You don't have to thank me for basic human decency, don't I?" His voice was soft, tinged with something that might have been wonder. "When was the last time someone defended you, Claire? When was the last time someone stood beside you when things got dangerous?" The question hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. I'd spent so long being invisible, being safe, being alone, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone care enough to fight for me. "I should get back to work," I whispered, not because I wanted to, but because the alternative, staying here, letting myself fall deeper into whatever this was, felt too dangerous in an entirely different way. "Should you?" Jinwoo stepped closer, and I could smell his cologne again, could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Or should you let me take you somewhere we can talk without interruption? Somewhere safe?" "Safe?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You just faced down 3 men who want to destroy your business, and you're offering me safety?" "Yes," he said simply. "Because with you, I feel safer than I have in years. Because you saw past their assumptions about me, past their prejudices. Because you stood up to men who could have hurt you, just to protect someone you barely know." His hand rose to cup my cheek, the touch gentle despite the calluses I could feel on his palm. "Because when you spoke to me in Korean last night, you gave me the first moment of genuine connection I've had since I came to this country." I leaned into his touch despite every warning voice in my head. "Jin-woo, have dinner with me tomorrow," he said. "Somewhere that's not here. Somewhere we can just be 2 people getting to know each other. No business, no threats, no complications. Your life seems to be full of complications. All the more reason to find some peace in it." His thumb traced across my cheekbone, and I felt myself melting under his touch. "Please, Claire, give me a chance to show you who I am when I'm not wearing armor." I should have said no. Should have recognized that getting involved with Jinwoo meant stepping into a world I didn't understand, full of dangers I couldn't anticipate. Should have protected my quiet, safe life and walked away from the storm brewing in his dark eyes. Instead, I heard myself whisper, "Okay." His smile was radiant, transforming his entire face. "Tomorrow at 7? I'll pick you up." "You don't know where I live." "No," he agreed, pulling out his phone. "But I'd like to." As I gave him my address, as we exchanged numbers like ordinary people beginning an ordinary courtship, I tried to ignore the voice in my head warning me that nothing about Jinwoo Park was ordinary. Tried to ignore the fact that I was stepping off a cliff into freefall, trusting a man I'd known for 2 days to catch me. But when he kissed my hand before leaving, a gesture so old-fashioned and gentle, it made my heart ache. I realized I was already falling. The only question was whether I'd land safely in his arms or crash into the dangerous world that surrounded him. Either way, there was no going back. The following evening found me standing before my closet in a state of complete paralysis, surrounded by rejected outfits and crippling uncertainty. What did one wear to dinner with a Korean businessman who may or may not be involved with organized crime? My wardrobe, carefully curated for invisibility and professionalism, seemed woefully inadequate for the occasion. I'd spent the day in a haze of anticipation and dread, going through the motions of my regular routine, while my mind churned with questions I couldn't answer. Who was Jinwoo really? What kind of business required such elaborate games of perception and misdirection? And what was I doing, agreeing to dinner with a man whose very presence seemed to attract danger? But underneath the fear was something else, something that made my pulse quicken every time I remembered the way he'd looked at me, the way he'd touched my face with such gentle reverence. When was the last time someone had seen me, really seen me, as more than just a waitress, more than just another invisible service worker? Finally, I settled on a simple black dress, elegant but not overly formal, paired with my grandmother's pearl earrings for courage. As I applied lipstick with trembling hands, I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized myself. My eyes were bright with nervous excitement, my cheeks flushed with anticipation. I looked alive in a way I hadn't in years. At exactly 7 o'clock, my doorbell rang. I grabbed my purse and jacket, took a deep breath, and opened the door. Jinwoo stood in the hallway wearing a charcoal gray suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean frame. But it was his expression that made my breath catch. Soft, almost vulnerable, as if he were as nervous about this evening as I was. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made heat rise in my cheeks. "Thank you. You look..." I paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound too forward, too revealing of the effect he had on me. "Very handsome." His smile was gentle, genuine. "Shall we?" He offered his arm, and I took it, feeling the solid warmth of him through his jacket. As we walked down the hallway toward the elevator, I was acutely aware of his presence beside me, the way he moved with controlled grace, the subtle scent of his cologne, the careful way he matched his pace to mine. "Where are we going?" I asked as we stepped into the elevator. "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere we can talk without worrying about being overheard." He glanced at me with those dark eyes that seemed to see too much. "I hope you don't mind Korean food." I laughed, some of my nervousness dissipating. "I think I can manage." The restaurant he chose was small and intimate, tucked away in a part of the city I'd never explored. The interior was warm and welcoming, with soft lighting and traditional decorations that spoke of authenticity rather than tourist appeal. A middle-aged Korean woman greeted Jinwoo with obvious familiarity and affection, speaking rapid Korean that I could only partially follow. "This is Claire," Jinwoo said in English, placing a gentle hand on my lower back. "Claire, meet Mrs. Kim. She owns this place and makes the best bulgogi in the city." Mrs. Kim smiled at me warmly. "Any friend of Jinwoo is family here. You sit, I bring you something special." She led us to a corner table, private and cozy, before bustling away to the kitchen. Jinwoo helped me into my chair, his fingers brushing against my shoulders as he pushed it in. The simple gesture sent shivers down my spine. "You're nervous," he observed as he took his seat across from me. "Terrified," I admitted, then immediately regretted the honesty. "I mean, don't." His hand crossed the table to cover mine. "Don't edit yourself for me, Claire. I asked you here because you're real, because you don't hide behind social niceties and calculated responses. Please don't start now." His touch was warm, reassuring, and I found myself relaxing slightly. "Okay, then yes, I'm terrified. I don't know anything about your world, Jinwoo. Yesterday, those men looked at you like you were their enemy, and Mrs. Whitmore treated you like you were her protege. I don't understand the game you're all playing." "No game?" he said quietly. "At least, not one I chose to join. But you're right. You deserve to understand what you're getting involved with." Mrs. Kim appeared with a bottle of wine and several small dishes, arranging them on the table with practiced efficiency. Jinwoo waited until she'd left before continuing. "My family has been in shipping for 3 generations, he began, his voice low and careful. "Legitimate business, mostly. Import, export, logistics. When I came to America 5 years ago, I thought I could build something clean here, something separate from the complications back home." He poured wine for both of us, his movements precise and controlled. But certain people don't like competition. They don't like outsiders building successful businesses in what they consider their territory. And they especially don't like it when those outsiders refuse to pay tribute or follow their rules. "The men from last night," I said, understanding beginning to dawn. "Among others, they want me to sell my business to them for a fraction of its worth, or accept them as partners, and give them control over my operations. They've been escalating their pressure for months." I took a sip of wine, trying to process what he was telling me. And if you refuse? His smile was grim. They make life difficult. Shipments go missing, permits get delayed, employees receive threats. Nothing they can't deny, nothing that can be traced back to them directly. So you pretend not to understand English? To learn their plans? Sometimes. Useful things. He met my eyes across the table. But also, there's a certain freedom in being underestimated. It gives you room to maneuver. Mrs. Kim returned with the main course. Bulgogi that smelled heavenly. Banchan that looked like tiny works of art. Rice that steamed in perfect white mounds. As she fussed over our table, adjusting dishes and making sure we had everything we needed, I watched Jinwoo interact with her. He was gentle, respectful, asking about her grandson's school performance and her husband's back problems. This was the real man, I realized. Not the controlled strategist or the dangerous player in business games, but someone who cared about a restaurant owner's family troubles. Now, he said once we were alone again, I've told you about my complications. Tell me about yours. I don't have complications, I protested. I'm just a waitress. No, he shook his head, those perceptive eyes studying my face. You're someone who speaks Korean because your grandmother taught you. Someone who stands up to dangerous men to protect strangers. Someone who works in an upscale restaurant but lives in a modest apartment and wears pearls that belonged to someone she loved. There's a story there, Claire. I'd like to hear it. The food was delicious, giving me something to do with my hands while I considered how much to reveal. There was something about Jinwoo's patient attention, his genuine interest, that made me want to open up in ways I hadn't in years. My grandmother was a war bride, I began slowly. She met my grandfather when he was stationed in Korea in the 50s. They fell in love, got married, and she came back to France with him. I touched the pearls at my ears unconsciously. She always said she lived between two worlds. Never fully Korean anymore, but never completely French either. And she taught you her language. Among other things, she was the one who encouraged me to travel, to experience different cultures. After she died, I followed her advice. I worked my way across Europe, learning languages, trying different jobs, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. Until now, I hesitated, twirling noodles around my chopsticks. I was engaged to a man in London, James. He was everything I thought I wanted. Stable, successful, predictable. But 3 months before our wedding, I realized that predictable meant boring, that stable meant stagnant, that he didn't really see me at all. He saw the idea of me, the version he wanted me to become. Jinwoo didn't say anything, just waited for me to continue. So I left, came here because it was far enough away that I couldn't change my mind and go back. Got the job at Le Jardin because it was temporary, something to do while I figured out what I really wanted from life. I met his eyes across the table. I've been drifting for 8 months, trying to become invisible, trying to convince myself that safe and alone was better than taking risks. And now I'm having dinner with a man who attracts danger like a magnet, and I can't remember the last time I felt this alive. The admission hung between us, raw and honest. Jinwoo reached across the table to take my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. I want to kiss you, he said quietly, his voice rough with honesty. I want to take you home and spend hours learning everything about you. I want to wake up tomorrow and know that last night wasn't a dream. My heart hammered against my ribs. Jinwoo! But I also want you to understand what you're choosing. Those men last night, they won't give up. Getting involved with me means accepting that your quiet, safe life is over. It means looking over your shoulder. It means being careful about where you go and who you trust. I won't lie to you about that. I stared down at our joined hands, his larger one completely engulfing mine. Everything rational in me screamed to pull away, to thank him for a lovely evening and retreat to my small, secure world. But when I looked up and saw the vulnerability in his dark eyes, the way he was holding his breath, waiting for my answer, I realized that my quiet life had already been shattered the moment I'd chosen to speak to him in Korean. I'm tired of being safe, I whispered. I'm tired of being invisible. Maybe it's time I learned how to live dangerously. His smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. Are you sure? No, I admitted. But I'm sure I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been. He lifted my hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to my knuckles. Then let me take you home. Let me show you how beautiful dangerous can be. The ride back to my apartment was electric with tension. Jin Woo's driver navigated the city streets while we sat in the back seat, not quite touching, but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Every time the car turned a corner, his knee brushed against mine, sending sparks of awareness through my nervous system. Tell me about Korea, I said, needing something to focus on besides the way his cologne was making me dizzy with want. About your family. His expression grew thoughtful. My father built our shipping business from nothing. He was a complicated man, honorable in his way, but he understood that sometimes you have to make difficult choices to protect what matters most. And your mother? She died when I was 15. Cancer. His voice softened with old grief. She was the one who taught me that strength without compassion is just cruelty. That power should be used to protect, not to dominate. Is that why you came here? To build something different? Partly, but also because my father's business methods were becoming incompatible with my principles. I wanted to prove that you could be successful without compromising your soul. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Naive, perhaps. Not naive. Hopeful. There's a difference. The car pulled up outside my building and my stomach fluttered with nervous anticipation. Jin Woo walked me to the front door, his hand warm on my lower back. Thank you for dinner, I said, fumbling with my keys, and for trusting me with your story. Thank you for listening. He stepped closer, and I could feel the solid warmth of his body. Claire? Yes? I meant what I said earlier, about wanting to kiss you. My breath caught. So kiss me. He cupped my face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the line of my cheekbones. For a moment we just stood there, breathing the same air, the weight of possibility hanging between us. Then his lips touched mine, soft and tentative at first, then deeper as I responded. The kiss was everything I'd imagined, and more. Gentle but passionate, controlled but desperate. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless and shaking. Come upstairs, I whispered before I could lose my courage. He searched my face, looking for doubt, for hesitation. Are you certain? Yes, and I was. Whatever tomorrow brought, whatever complications were waiting around the corner, I wanted this night. I wanted him. My apartment was small and modest compared to the elegant world he inhabited, but he looked around with genuine interest, taking in the books lining my shelves, the photographs of my travels, the small touches that made the space uniquely mine. You have your grandmother's taste, he observed, touching a delicate porcelain figurine she'd given me. She always said that beautiful things were meant to be lived with, not just displayed. Wise woman. He turned to face me, and the intensity in his gaze made my knees weak. Like her granddaughter, I moved toward him slowly, my heart racing with nervous excitement. When I reached up to touch his face, he closed his eyes and leaned into my palm. You're trembling, he murmured. So are you. He opened his eyes, and I saw my own wonder reflected there. This powerful, controlled man was as affected by me as I was by him. The realization was intoxicating. I don't want to rush you, he said softly. We have time. Do we? I asked. Yesterday those men made it clear that your business problems aren't going away. How do I know we'll have tomorrow? Something dark flickered across his expression. Because I'll make sure of it. Whatever it takes, Claire. I'll keep you safe. And who's going to keep you safe? The question seemed to surprise him. I can take care of myself. Can you? Or have you just been alone for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to have someone worry about you? He stared at me for a long moment, something vulnerable and raw flickering in his eyes. You worry about me? From the moment I saw those men treating you like you didn't matter, yes. And it terrifies me, because I barely know you, but somehow you've become important to me. He pulled me into his arms then, holding me tight against his chest. I could feel his heart racing beneath my cheek, could feel the slight tremor in his hands as they stroked my hair. "You matter to me too," he whispered into my hair. "More than you should, more than is safe for either of us." I pulled back to look at him. "Then let's stop being safe. Let's be reckless and stupid and alive." This time, when he kissed me, there was nothing tentative about it. His mouth was hungry, demanding, and I met his passion with my own. My hands fisted in his jacket, pulling him closer, needing to feel the solid reality of him against me. We moved together toward my bedroom, shedding clothes and inhibitions with equal abandon. Every touch was electric, every kiss a revelation. When he laid me down on my bed and looked at me, with such reverence, such wonder, I felt beautiful in a way I never had before. "You're perfect," he breathed, his hands mapping the curves of my body with gentle thoroughness. "No," I gasped, as his lips found that sensitive spot just below my ear. "I'm just yours." The words surprised me with their truth. Somewhere between that first conversation in Korean and this moment, I had become his. Not in any possessive, ownership sense, but in the way that two souls recognize each other across impossible odds. He made love to me with a patience and tenderness that brought tears to my eyes. Every touch was worship, every kiss a promise. When I finally fell apart in his arms, crying out his name, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. The careful walls I'd built around my heart crumbled, leaving me exposed and vulnerable and completely, utterly his. Afterward, we lay tangled together in my sheets, our breathing slowly returning to normal. Jinwoo traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder, his touch so gentle it made my heart ache. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. "Now we figure out how to build something beautiful in the middle of chaos." His arms tightened around me. "If you're willing," "I'm willing," I said without hesitation. "Whatever comes next, I want to face it with you." He pressed a kiss to the top of my head. "Then we'll face it together." I fell asleep in his arms, feeling safer and more cherished than I had in years. But even in my dreams, I couldn't shake the feeling that our peace was temporary, that somewhere in the shadows, dangerous men were planning to tear apart everything we were beginning to build. I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. Gray morning light filtered through my curtains, and for a moment, I was disoriented, unsure why my body felt so deliciously sore, why my bed smelled like expensive cologne and masculine warmth. Then memory crashed back. Jinwoo, dinner, the way he touched me with such reverence, the words of love and promise we'd whispered in the dark. I reached for him instinctively, but my hand found only cool sheets. "Jinwoo?" I called softly, sitting up and looking around my small bedroom. No answer. My phone buzzed again, and I grabbed it with shaking hands. A text from an unknown number. "Get dressed. You have 30 minutes to pack essentials and leave. Don't go to work. Don't follow normal routines. Jinwoo will explain everything. Trust no one else." Ice flooded my veins. I threw off the covers and stumbled to my feet, looking around frantically for any sign of where Jinwoo had gone. His clothes were gone from my floor, but there was a note on my dresser written in his careful handwriting. "Claire, I'm sorry I had to leave before you woke. The situation has escalated. Please follow the instructions in the text exactly. I promise I'll explain everything soon. You're not alone in this. Minus J." My hands shook as I read the note again, trying to make sense of what was happening. Escalated how? What kind of danger were we in that required me to abandon my normal life, with 30 minutes notice? But even as fear clawed at my chest, I found myself moving with determined efficiency. I trusted Jinwoo. Whatever was happening, whatever had gone wrong, I trusted him to keep me safe. I threw clothes into a suitcase with little regard for coordination or practicality, grabbing essentials like my passport, the small amount of cash I kept for emergencies, and my grandmother's pearls. As I dressed in jeans and a sweater, my phone buzzed with another text from the same unknown number. Car waiting downstairs. Black sedan. Driver will ask for your grandmother's name. Answer. Soonja. Do not get in any other vehicle. Soonja. How did they know my grandmother's Korean name? I'd never told that to anyone except Jinwoo last night over dinner when I'd told him about her life between two worlds. I grabbed my suitcase and purse, took one last look around my apartment, my safe, quiet sanctuary that had become a prison of loneliness, and headed for the door. Whatever was waiting for me outside, it had to be better than hiding from life forever. The black sedan was exactly where the text had promised, engine running, windows tinted dark enough that I couldn't see inside. As I approached, the driver's window rolled down to reveal a middle-aged Korean man with kind eyes and a worried expression. "What was your grandmother's name?" he asked in accented English. "Soonja," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. He nodded and popped the trunk. "I'm David Kim. Jinwoo sent me to bring you somewhere safe." I hesitated for just a moment, looking back at my building, at the life I was leaving behind. Then I thought about Jinwoo's hands on my skin, his promises whispered in the dark, the way he'd looked at me like I was something precious worth protecting. I put my suitcase in the trunk and got in the car. David pulled away from the curb with practiced ease, navigating the morning traffic with the skill of someone who knew the city intimately. I sat in the back seat, watching familiar neighborhoods flash by, trying to calm my racing heart. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Safe house. Jinwoo will meet us there soon." David glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "He's very worried about you. Says you're important." What happened? Why did he have to leave so suddenly? David's expression darkened. "The men who've been pressuring his business, they escalated things last night. Made threats. Specific threats about people Jinwoo cares about." The implication hit me like a physical blow. "They threaten me?" "Among others. Jinwoo's not taking any chances with your safety." We drove in silence for a while, leaving the city center behind for quieter suburban streets. I tried to process what was happening, tried to understand how my life had changed so dramatically in less than 48 hours. 2 days ago, I was invisible, safe, alone. Now I was fleeing my apartment because dangerous men saw me as leverage against the man I was falling in love with. The safe house turned out to be a modest 2-story home in a middle-class neighborhood. Unremarkable and forgettable. Exactly the kind of place someone could hide without attracting attention. David parked in the driveway and helped me with my suitcase, leading me to the front door. "Mrs. Park will take care of you until Jinwoo arrives," he said, ringing the doorbell. The door opened to reveal an elegant Korean woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and Jinwoo's dark eyes. She looked at me with curiosity and something that might have been approval. "You must be Claire," she said in perfect English. "I'm Helen Park, Jinwoo's aunt." I stared at her in surprise. "His aunt?" "Among other things. Come in, dear. You look exhausted." She led me into a comfortable living room, furnished with understated elegance. David spoke to her briefly in Korean before leaving, and I caught enough to understand that Jinwoo was dealing with the situation and would arrive as soon as possible. "Sit," Helen said, gesturing to a plush sofa. "I'll make tea." As she busied herself in the kitchen, I looked around the room, noting the family photographs that lined the mantelpiece. Jinwoo appeared in several of them. Younger, laughing, surrounded by people who clearly loved him. Seeing him in this context, as someone's nephew and cousin and friend, made my chest tight with emotion. Helen returned with a tea service that looked like it belonged in a museum, pouring fragrant jasmine tea into delicate porcelain cups. "He told me about you," she said without preamble, settling into the chair across from me. "Said you spoke to him in Korean? That you stood up for him when other people were cruel." "It wasn't anything special," I protested. "Anyone would have done the same." Helen's smile was knowing. "No, dear. Most people would have looked the other way. Most people prefer not to get involved in other people's troubles." I sipped my tea, trying to organize my swirling thoughts. "Mrs. Park, what kind of business is Jinwoo really in?" "The same business his father was in, and his grandfather before him. moving things from one place to another, facilitating commerce between countries and cultures. Her expression grew serious. But commerce, especially international commerce, attracts attention from people who prefer to control rather than compete. The men who threatened him last night? Representatives of a collective that believes certain territories belong to them exclusively. They don't appreciate outsiders building successful operations in what they consider their sphere of influence. I set down my teacup with shaking hands. Are they dangerous? Very. But so is Jinwoo, in his own way. He's not the helpless target they think he is. Before I could ask what she meant, the front door opened, and Jinwoo's voice called out in Korean. Helen responded, and a moment later he appeared in the doorway, still wearing yesterday's suit, but rumpled now. His hair slightly mussed, and exhaustion evident in every line of his body. But when he saw me, his entire demeanor changed. Relief flooded his features, and he crossed the room in 3 quick strides, pulling me into his arms before I could even stand. "Thank God you're safe," he murmured into my hair. "I was so afraid." "I'm okay," I whispered, holding him tight. "I'm okay." He pulled back to look at me, his hands framing my face. "I'm sorry I had to leave like that. I'm sorry you had to wake up alone and scared." "What happened?" His jaw tightened. "They made their intentions clear. If I don't sell my business to them by the end of the week, they'll start targeting people I care about. Starting with you." The words sent ice through my veins, but also sparked something else. Anger. "So we run? We hide? We let them win?" "We keep you alive," Jinwoo said firmly. "Everything else is secondary." "No," I pulled away from him, standing up on unsteady legs. "No, I won't be the reason you give up everything you've built. I won't be your weakness." "Claire!" Jinwoo ran his hands through his hair, looking frustrated and exhausted. "It's not that simple. These aren't people you can negotiate with or reason with. They understand only power and fear." "Then maybe it's time to speak their language," Helen said quietly. Both Jinwoo and I turned to stare at her. She set down her teacup with deliberate precision. "Your father tried to keep you separated from the family's traditional methods of problem-solving," she continued. "But perhaps it's time you remembered that Park men have been protecting what's theirs for generations, and not always through legitimate channels. Flexible solutions? People who need to disappear. Goods that need to reach their destinations without official documentation. Problems that need to be resolved quietly and permanently." The implications of what he was telling me slowly sank in. Your family is connected to organized crime. Connected to people who understand that sometimes the law is inadequate for protecting what matters most, Helen corrected gently. Jinwoo came to America hoping to build something cleaner, but some problems require old solutions. I stared at Jinwoo, seeing him in an entirely new light, the controlled power I'd sensed in him, the way other people reacted to his presence, the deference even Mrs. Whitmore had shown him. It all made sense now. "You're not just a businessman," I whispered. "No," he admitted quietly. "I'm not." The silence stretched between us, heavy with implications and unspoken questions. Part of me wanted to run, to flee from this revelation and return to my safe, predictable world. But a larger part, the part that had been awakened by his touch and his honesty, recognized that I'd already made my choice. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. Jinwoo's head snapped up, surprise flickering across his features. "Claire, you don't understand what you're saying." "I understand that I love you," I said simply, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "I understand that you're in danger, and these people want to hurt you by hurting me. I understand that I'd rather face whatever comes next with you than spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been." Helen smiled, an expression of pure satisfaction. "Oh, I definitely like her." Jinwoo stared at me for a long moment, something shifting in his dark eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "If we do this, if we fight back, there's no going back to your quiet life. No more invisibility. No more safety. Are you sure you're ready for that? I thought about my grandmother, about her courage in leaving everything she knew to build a new life with the man she loved. I thought about my own journey, running from commitment and risk until I'd nearly disappeared entirely. I've been invisible for too long, I said firmly. Maybe it's time I learned how to be dangerous. Jinwoo's smile was slow and devastating, full of promise and peril in equal measure. Then let me show you exactly how dangerous we can be together.